Hello and welcome to another edition of Press Row on Rivalry Family Media. I'm Todd Robbins. Happy to have you along with us for another edition of Press Row, and happy to be joined today by the principal of Leominster High School, Dr. Steve Dubzinski. Steve, great to have you here with us on another edition of Press Row under what is, the most interesting of circumstances. We said when we were kind of getting set up here, just another boring day in education.
Yeah, it has certainly been a challenge, to say the least, and from March 12th to where we are today. But it's great. It's great to be with you. And I want to say this, and you're a humble pie man, so you're not going to do this yourself. But what you're doing as a service to us and have continued to do for high school athletics is unmatched. Never mind the state. It's unmatched across the country, what you do to promote kids, to promote athletics, promote high school sports. And as much as you root for the Big Blue Machine, and I know you do, you're as unbiased as you can be on your broadcast. So I want to thank you and Kate and the brains behind the operation, and
Absolutely.
For what you guys do. So thank you.
I appreciate that so much. It's been great to be involved for so long, and obviously we're looking forward to so many more years to come and what will hopefully be a return to what we know is normal very, very soon. I have to ask you before we get into the nuts and bolts of education, first about mom and dad and how they're handling this whole thing. They are the most active folks that I know. They're all about like community engagement and getting out to athletic events. This has to be the most frustrating time for them. There's nowhere to go and no athletics to see.
Yeah, it's crazy. The other night I came down, and if there's not a game at Wachusett to watch their grandkids play, or a game at Springfield College or Dean College to watch the other two, they say to me, "Where you going?" I said, "Oh, well, Leominster, we got a game. It's a girls' basketball game." "Oh, we're coming." And off they come, right, to see anything. So they're out and about. This has been a struggle, and I think it's been a struggle because of their age as well, because I kind of put them in lockdown mode.
Absolutely.
But necessarily. And although I did come down the other night in the, I think 1994 or 97 Beanpot Championship was on Nesson, I think, and Irene was glued to the TV. So she suddenly became a big hockey fan of a Beanpot. Any competition at this point we're willing to watch on TV. So.
Oh, that's it. We're running out. ESPN's going to be running Korean baseball soon, so maybe I can find Korean high school sports to bring to you as well, as some kind of a supplement somewhere along the way. And we talk about trying to find some form of normalcy, and of course, in your everyday job, I mean, there's something about education, about establishing that world of normalcy, and for a lot of kids, education is for them some of the best parts of their day, and it just came to a point where we were no longer able to continue in the world of education the way we knew it. So we were kind of forced into this distant world, and education had to kind of be reinvented. I give Leominster a lot of credit. You all had probably the most hopeful version of this. You were maybe hoping to continue another week before all of this would come and before the governor finally shut things down.
Yeah, as I said to you before we came on, I can't say enough about our faculty. We got the call about 1:00 on Thursday the 12th and said there may be a shutdown, and so prep for it. And we were probably as late as anybody announcing the 2-week shutdown. And originally it started as a 2-day shutdown, and then we kind of said, I think it's in everybody's best interest. But our faculty was unbelievable. That Thursday night and that early Friday morning, they stayed late. They came in early so that every kid was leaving with a plan, a 2-week educational plan. That just wasn't at the high school, it was district-wide. So I can't say enough about them. And as I said to you, I think our kids bought in early, and then it kind of went to the credit, no credit. And so it was kind of, as any good teenager, sans you and I, of course, kids may have not taken it as seriously or as in-depth as we would have liked it, but we're back on track. And we just ran the numbers the other day. I think our percentage of engagement is really good, considering the situation that everybody's in.
Well, and that I think has been such the buy-in that you're pointing to, that engagement piece, I think is hard enough when there's the pull of the rest of the world, when you're in a classroom under normal circumstances, even in a class that students want to quote unquote be in every day, keeping them engaged and focused and blocking out the rest of the world, whether it be the cell phone or a computer or anything else, can be difficult enough. Now you're sending them outside of the walls of the school and you're trying to pull them back in. And it's incredibly difficult in order to keep them engaged.
It is. And I think I was talking to a special education teacher last night who starts every Google Classroom with a song, and his last name is Lee. And just by chance, because, when you ride with Wally, you listen to the 1950s on Sirius radio. There's some song named Mr. Lee comes on by the Bobettes, I believe, or somewhere. And so I texted him last night and said, "Oh, I'm gonna run that tomorrow." So I think, it has tested everyone's creative juices as well as to what we can do. And it's not just, here's the book, read, get back to me. We're going to have to find some discussion to have, or some creative. And I think it's great. I think it has forced a veteran teacher to think outside the box, a new teacher to kind of say, this isn't really what my student teaching experience was all about. But I do think it's also opened up a lot of avenues of what education can be. It doesn't have to be, 25 kids in a classroom with a book. Like, it can be out and about. We have our CTI program, which is a little bit more challenging for us because of the vocational aspect, and that's so hands-on. But they too, Danny Baychant, who's the principal there, has been doing a phenomenal job of getting those teachers engaged. And, I'm talking about the teachers. There's another flip side of this. Those kids have been great. Our engagement rate is up, and I'm really proud of where we are as a community and what Superintendent Deacon has done for this, with the support of Mayor Mazzarella. It's been a great partnership. So I think everyone's bought in. I think we're moving forward.
When you consider engagement, and obviously what I think teachers do best, and of course what are the best parts of education, I feel like building connections with students is ultimately what educators do, and maybe even more so than the content and the curriculum that we're all teaching at this point in time. Just building those weekly connections and something that looks like normal, even if it's not even close to normal, is certainly better than nothing. And maybe the most important thing that we're all doing is just establishing those relationships and keeping them going.
Yeah, I can't imagine where we'd be without Zoom or Google Classrooms, Google Meets, Google Hangouts, whatever.
I had never even heard of Zoom, by the way, 2 months ago. This is
right?
Like a totally new thing 2 months ago.
I know. We had a Zoom family party the other night. I have relatives that live in New York and in Boston, and we all logged on. My brother's in Rutland, my sister's in Holden, and we were all, and had a great night. So it's forced us to, those who aren't technologically advanced, and I would probably be somewhat in that category, has forced the hand here a little bit. But again, you're right. The engagement and the communication, the relationships. And I say this all the time, and I don't mean any disrespect to any textbook that's ever written, or Shakespeare. No one runs to school every day to read that book. They run to school to have that discussion with the teacher about that book, or to have those connections in the lunchroom or in gym or in art, whatever it is. So you're right. That has been taken away, and it's tough. It's tough to get back. No offense. This is like a highlight of my day that I get to speak to Todd Robbins on Zoom right now.
No, I certainly I can appreciate that, and that's, I think, the benefit, right? You have this face-to-face interaction, so you're able to create some part of the environment. And at the same time, I've been thinking to myself, when I get off of a Zoom class with students, I think to myself, well, that was really great, but at the same time, it feels like something's missing. There's like this, like it falls flat. We've always had this thing in television. We talk about how the camera and the lens and the way the viewer interacts with it kind of flattens out emotion. You have to over project in order for them to be able to get it. In some ways, I feel like there's this piece of education that you can recreate in a classroom setting, you can't seem to recreate in a virtual setting.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, and you guys do an unbelievable job announcing a game, but you feel a piece of that energy in that, what makes the hair on your arms stand up at that Leominster-Fitchburg basketball game or football game. Or, I've been saying this a lot in the last, because we've been reliving some great memories of Bryant Cordero running down the left sideline with a little over 7 minutes to go to make things great, and have that turkey taste a little bit better. But the same thing is in a classroom. You're right. And you feel that poem being read. You feel that history lesson being done. You feel that biology or chemistry lab being introduced, or that world language. You feel it all. Yeah. So you're right. It is. It's a missing piece. But again, I think this has allowed us to, instead of being 0, it's maybe at 50%, 75%. So it's helpful.
And at least it has created some form of normalcy. And of course, we know as we kind of move our way through this, I mean, there are ramifications. There are ramifications that are going to come with this as well. And I think part of that is going to be gaps. We know gaps are going to exist somewhere. And of course, I know at one point in time before the governor really did finish and decide the entire school year was not going to continue, one of the things he was talking about is educators wanting their students to be able to come back before the summer to at least try to figure out where those gaps ultimately exist. How is that going to affect, obviously, as things move forward for, students that will be rising and continuing at Leominster High School? We'll get to that class of 2020 in a little bit, but those students that are going to come back and are going to be seniors, juniors, and sophomores, and the middle school students that will come up and be freshmen, how is it going to adapt or force a change in the curriculum delivery, the path that normally would be taken when we get back to an in-person education, hopefully come this fall?
Well, as you know, Todd, we were so much further advanced than most of the country at Leominster High School that they're just catching up to us because of the gaps. There are going to be gaps, and we've said that right away. And I think the first month of school next year is going to be exactly what you just described, is evaluating, because we can be, realistic here and say that Todd Robbins did all his work in Algebra 2, and Steve Dubzinski did 75 of his work. And he really didn't, he tried to do 100, but he didn't understand that last 25%. And he's here, but now they're in the same class. So we actually just met as some department heads, our department heads met the other day and talked about that. Like, we're going to have to be flexible and understanding. And I just saw that the Boston Public Schools have announced that everyone is progressing to the next grade next year. I don't know if there's another solution to that. I think you could, offer some remedial courses over the summer online, at least, to get those kids caught up, or if there are any questions. We've really done a great job with the PBS partnership that Desi has outlined. Khan Academy, especially for math, has been great. So you're right, there's going to be some gaps, but it's not just going to be gaps here in the state. It's going to be gaps across the country because everyone has been disrupted by this. The only solution, I think, is to continue on. Those seniors have applied, gotten into college. They need to move. Everybody kind of needs to progress their way. So how you address it, I think, is going to be not only school by school, but student by student, because where I am and where you are in that Algebra 2 class are going to be in different places. Yet we're going to now be in, pre-calculus or whatever the next pathway is for us. And I think our faculty understands that. We kind of set up in the last month, here's where we are, and our algebra teachers and our US History 1 teachers and English teachers and science teachers got together and said, where do we want our kids, call them competencies, call them baseline frameworks, whatever, where do you want them to be June 19th? Our last day for students is June 19th. Where do you want every Algebra 1 kid, no matter who you had for a teacher, what are the 10 things you want them to know? And we hope everybody gets there. No offense, as well as I do, whether we were in school or not. Not everyone's going to get to that 10. So, but we did put forth kind of a common platform of where we want curriculum to be come June 19th, and then hope that we can all get there. So we have some common goals and speaking the same language.
You mentioned the populations of like special education, and we all know when you work in education, there's a gap there already under normal circumstances where, the kid that, maybe isn't going to get all the way to where you want them to be, but, you're going to keep working with them, and there are modifications and supports for them in order to be able to continue to move forward and stay with their colleagues. They are now going to move along with their colleagues, very likely to that next grade. Has this maybe made that gap even wider for them because they've had to drive it on their own?
Two things. I think answer to that question, possibly. And the other one is it may have also opened up an avenue because I know you're in education, so you understand this, but special education isn't necessarily, they learn differently, right? So that may have opened up a different avenue. And what I think I'm also seeing is some kids saying to the teacher, hey, listen, I did it this way. And have you ever thought about, I use this as a resource after class every day. And it's opened up a lot of different avenues for kids to get to that success rate. The kid that isn't the quote unquote math student or science student or isn't an avid reader. We're going to have some gaps there. Might they be widened in some areas? I can tell you, as I'm sitting here on my phone, I just looked down, was buzzing from Laura Van Dorn, who's our special education coordinator. And I just opened an email before you and I got on about the accommodations and the modifications that that department in the city of Leominster, at the high school especially, is trying to make, and utilizing our paraprofessionals and our tutors to get as much support as we can around those students. So yeah, I think the other piece of that, Todd, is that socio-emotional piece and that connection piece that you kind of spoke on earlier. That's really important to a kid that's struggling, no matter what, whether special education, regular education, whatever. A kid that doesn't understand that material might need that little either kick in the rear end or a hug that day to get them to the next level. And that's been our most difficult piece to kind of help them there. But I think there will be gaps where they fall. But again, I think another door could open, and those kids could help us explain how they learned, and it's not the norm.
You know, I think in part too, something that if you're not intricately involved with the educational process, you don't realize that every school has made this virtual thing look differently. You know, between Kate and I in two different school districts across Massachusetts, you know, one district is much more once a week. They put out their assignments. Each department has their series of assignments that students are working on. And then in the school district I'm working in, there's a set schedule for when they have in-person meetings that students have to follow up on. There's two different slots for every course block you have, and they have to come to one of those 30-minute blocks each time per week. What does Leominster's version look like, or what does Leominster High School's version look like, that balance between the in-person education piece using something like Zoom and obviously the kind of self-driven piece that they have to do through whether it's Google Classroom or otherwise?
You're right. I think each place, so I'm on a conference call every Friday at 9:00 with about 30 other high school principals from the Midwatch League. And we throw ideas off each other. What are you doing about this? What are you about graduation? What does your remote learning look like? We kind of put some guidelines out, and then let the teacher, what are they most comfortable with? And you know that classroom better than I do. You know, maybe second period is much more involved than fourth period. So we encourage a couple meetings a week, you know, and check-ins at least every other day by the student to make sure those teachers are available. Originally, Fridays were a big day for office hours and one-to-one, or, you know, Zoom type of, we use Google Meets, but classrooms to do that. But again, the guidelines set forth from the superintendent that came down, you know, were great. We're kind of what works for you, and let's get that success rate. So no one was being micromanaged, but I do think what I have seen is much more collegiality among peer-to-peer in the teaching. Like, you know, there's been a lot more. I'm just going to throw Sam Como out there, who you know as a great coach and you know, great former athlete with us, and now a great coach, and most importantly, a health teacher. And she and Devin Gates. I went to college with Devin O'Neill. Devin Gates have put together a health curriculum online with a drop-down menu. It is they should sell it. It is unbelievable what they've done, and they sent that out to our faculty, so it allows everybody to kind of you know, go off each other. And I have Sandy Cucchiera, who's a veteran teacher. You know, Google wasn't her thing. You know, she's a paper and pencil person. That's what she was trained in. That's how she is. She's excellent at it. She's had to adapt, and has now said to me, I'm glad somebody pushed me to Google Classrooms, because it has made my life easier, and I love it. So it's great. I think that's the other piece of it, is that the collegiality and the just bouncing ideas off each other has been great at our place.
No question about that. Yeah, it is funny when you get that first Google experience where you never have to carry a piece of paper home. It's a win-win, and I'm not even getting paid. I'm not even a spokesman, but as it turns out, it is win-win. You know, the student doesn't have to carry a piece of paper home, nor do you. That is a win-win.
You know, that's the other piece that we were not a one-to-one district. You know, a Chromebook is what we use. But what we have probably handed out over 300, and the school department has done an unbelievable job allocating some resources to, you know, in case this happens again, we've got to make a commitment here that every kid has to have a piece of technology in front of them, because that's the textbook. Although I'm a big book guy, right? I mean, I like to hold it. I like to smell it. I like to take it to the beach. But that's kind of educationally going to go by the wayside here with some remote learning. So.
You've mentioned her a couple of times. We'll take a second to deviate from the conversation. We have to talk about the superintendent of schools, Paula Deacon. Certainly been on the job now for a handful of years, has gotten the lay of the land. And I think, although I know she does sign your paycheck, I won't make you go too deep or too far into it. The right person for the job. I think the community has felt that. I think it was something that was sorely missing in Leominster. And I can think of this going back 20 years when I was a student. Leominster started to deviate away from this. The self-grown, internally grown administrator who grew up, started as a teacher, became a principal, and rose through the ranks and found their way to superintendent. That's how it was done early in my education, and by the tail end of it, that wasn't the case. And I think you as well are certainly a product of that as well. Is the educator that understands the district because they've been there long enough and seen all of the different rungs along the way.
Yeah, I think there's two pieces to that, right? You've been in the classroom, you've been a building principal or administrator, you've been a central office, so you get the entire, you also need to get the community you live in. And she's a resident of Leominster. You know, she saw the light, as I like to say. She came from across the border, and saw the light and has come over. But you're right, she was the right person at the right time for the job. She's got a great personality. She listens. She's a leader, and our school committee's done a great job working hand in hand with her to move our district forward. You know, this is a monumental challenge which has occurred. We are, the principals meet with her every Tuesday and Friday, and that's the other piece of this. You know, from K to 12 in this district, I always love graduation because, yes, we reap the benefits, all right? We have that wonderful day where our faculty is revered and thanked, but listen, I go back to years ago. I always think like physics and calculus, those are the most important things. Like those are the most difficult courses, honors Spanish 5. I was a mystery reader one day in Donna Dubzinski's kindergarten class. And I sat back and I said, she's teaching these kids to read. Like, is there any better, bigger responsibility that you have as elementary school people than giving them the foundation, the building blocks, and then we come up and reap the benefits? And I think the superintendent gets that. She gets it's K to or pre-K to 12, you know. And, you know, Todd, you said it 20 years ago, like we have a changing population. We have a very large ELL population. I was just talking about a family the other day, the Crespo family, who were actually came here after the hurricane in Puerto Rico and are now staying here through the pandemic in the United States. So I said, you guys can't catch a break, brother. I saw the dad the other day, and listen, it's a wonderful community. It's an all welcoming, all inclusive community. And absolutely, we've got the right person at the top.
It certainly brings a different personality, having met so many superintendents and administrators now, not just as an educator, but as a student for years and years and years, brings about a personality that welcomes in that community and can reach so many different people at so many different levels. I'm going to use the word spunky, just has this right air. When you walk in and meet her, she has the right air for this community.
Yeah, you know, I was actually just with her because we have a couple surprises for the class of 2020 coming. So I had to go do a quick picture with her to promote one of them. So that's the teaser for this Friday. But I was just with her, and, you know, we're outside of central office, 6 feet apart. We have our masks on, and out comes the fire chief, right? And that's the wonderful thing about it. The fire chief Sidlow comes out, police chief Goldman comes out, the mayor is accessible. It's just a very good unified group in the city right now. And I think that speaks to why our school choice is up. It speaks to why kids want to come to the public schools in Leominster, live in Leominster. You know, I think right now we're on an upswing, and it's great. Let's enjoy it.
And that is also a great teaser to wanting to bring her on this program at some point in time as well. Hopefully in the very near future. It would be great to hear that pre-K to 12 perspective. As we turn our attention kind of back toward the responsibilities at the high school level that you certainly have. You know, we were talking a little bit ago about the curriculum and the delivery of the curriculum, and obviously how everything, you know, switched on a dime, and the gaps that we're going to have to navigate on the other side of this. I think we are always in education talking about the push-pull of education and the curriculum track and how one thing connects to the next and just how much do students really need to know on topic X, whatever that may ultimately be. And then a thing like this comes along and pretty much all of that gets thrown out the window and you're starting over again and reinventing education on the fly. When you think about kind of the face of public education and curriculum specifically, have we now, because of something like this, had to switch so far away from what we're used to doing? Is there a case where maybe the face of public education has changed dramatically and will continue to stay and look different when we come back to this on the other side?
I think so. I think there are some positives that have come out of this. Okay. One is like what you just described. It's going to look differently. I teach a course at Mount Westchester Community College. I teach an intro to psych course, and one of the small units there is on intelligence. Well, just in our lifetime, life has changed. You have Google, you have an iPad in front of you or your phone, and you need an answer to a question. You can get that within, 3 seconds. Capital of, boom. And you're going to get capital of Venezuela is Caracas. Okay, next. So, and I always say this, there's very few jobs that require quick thinking, like medicine, doctor, nurse, and then I always just throw in my pilot. I would like my pilot to be a quick thinker. Other than that, unless you've got to make a split-second decision, it has changed. I think what we found about this is a lot more critical thinking, less, turn to page 7 and copy down the vocab words. And I really hope people aren't doing that any longer. Obviously, you got to have a foundation, you got to have a base. But it's about critical thinking, and it's about conversation, and it's about communication, relationship building. I say this, that if you can deal with people, you can do a lot of things in this world. If you have good interpersonal skills, you can do a lot of jobs. And I think that has what as this has become a little bit, that the classroom is presenting the material and letting the kid run with it and think for himself. I get texts and emails from teachers. There was Eli Barrio, who teaches a course with us, a world history course, sent me an exchange back between he and a student it was just refreshing. It was about, fascism and why isn't socialism a good thing? And then they tied in Bernie and why can't we do this? Why can't we do more? It was just a great exchange back and forth. You don't get that exchange reading a textbook. You get that exchange from, a conversation with a teacher. And you might not have had that conversation in a classroom of 25 kids, but this has allowed you to, have some quality time one-to-one.
I think back on my education a lot when I'm trying to be an educator, and I try to connect to when I'm putting things together for my own students. What is it about my education that I remember? And I think you pointed to it correct. It's not the vocabulary word on that page somewhere, although I probably know it because it was something I was taught, but it's more about when I think about my education and what came out of it, it was a way of thinking. The educators that I interacted with for years and years and years helped shape a way of thinking and a way of processing things and a way of interacting with the world. And maybe you're right. It's the skills and it's the way of thinking that we are passing along that maybe is even more important than that factoid that, you're right, can likely be Googled.
Yeah, it's funny you brought up your education, because as I was at work this morning and came up to my parents' house and was on the phone with Lynn Spilios, who was Lindy Amichis. I'm not sure how long ago, but she said,
the switch happened about 20 years ago because she was the amateur
she said,
English
Todd,
teacher.
I can look back on my classroom and I know exactly where he sat in my English class. So, yes. So it's not only your relationship with them, it's their relationship with you as well. And students stand out. And yes, by the way, I'm sure you did know that vocab word because your vocabulary is extensive.
I appreciate that. If nothing else, I got that. I'm still not always sure where the comma goes, though, so my English teacher may not be happy with that somewhere along the way.
That darn semicolon always gets you, too.
When we talk about education and extracurriculars, I think a lot, we always say to students that, an extracurricular or an opportunity in education, it's a combination of both a right to get a public education, but then there's also the extracurricular and the piece. It is a privilege in so many ways. And I think sometimes people miss that because they don't look globally on just how fortunate in the United States we are to have a public education system that is as strong as it is, and to have, all the extracurriculars that support that pre-K to 12 experience you were talking about. Do you think on the other side of this, maybe a little more focus and a little more appreciation will be there, hopefully for students, now that this has been taken away from them, for a period of time, that maybe they'll get it just a little bit more about how important this time is. You eventually get it, but it comes a lot later. I appreciate it a lot more now than I did then.
Don't you?
And
Right.
and I certainly think maybe on the other side of this, they'll get that.
Yeah, it's funny. I have been into Market Basket a couple times where our students are working and they all look at me and go, Dubs, when? We've got to get back. I miss you. I miss school. I miss Mrs. So-and-so, and I miss my friends, and I miss lunch, and I miss the games. And yeah, I think this has, two things have happened. I think the positive is it's kind of made us appreciate that, this is an awful situation, but it's made us appreciate family. It's made us appreciate health, good decision making. I do think our students and our faculty, our faculty appreciates, I get that all the time. Like Julio de Carvalho, who is a brand new Spanish teacher with us, drives in every day from Lowell, just texted me last night. It's Teacher Appreciation Week. So I sent something out to our faculty and he wrote, Dub, I don't miss you, but I do miss our students. So, so it goes both ways. Todd, you mentioned extracurriculars. We had from UMass Lowell this spring, we hosted 4 Fulbright scholars from around, they host about 30 to 50, I think, from around the globe. We had 4 at Leominster High School for a 6-week stretch. And one of the women was from Argentina. And she was a big basketball fan because she has 2 boys. And she said their sports are not tied to their school. So you play for your community, but it's not like you play for Leominster High School. So she was so enthralled with the athletics and the extracurriculars and the school spirit and how it ties it all together. And so, it's a unique place. The United States and how we do things is unique. And I do think we do it the right way.
No question about that, and hopefully a lot of smiles when we return to what is normal sooner, hopefully rather than later. Let's turn our attention to the class of 2020. I know you have some surprises you've already teased coming up at the tail end of the week, and I know this was one of the harder parts because and it's had to have been that way for every school district, because I know it was when I spoke to my seniors, the thing they wanted to know the most. What is going on with graduation? Where is prom at? I know I was listening to a meeting Kate was in on not long ago when the administration said to the teachers, all right, we'll talk about anything else you want about curriculum, but no, we're not going to talk about graduation. Okay, any questions? Yeah, when's graduation? Was the first question that came out of the pile. So, I mean, these things, like, they seemingly are minuscule, but when at the time, they really are. They're huge life markers. How difficult has that process been, navigating, figuring out what the right balance is?
So I can appreciate that conversation with that principal, because those Friday morning calls with the league principals, that has been, monopolizing our conversation. And we're a little bit unique because we have 460 to, 480 graduates a year. So it's not like we can do anything small. Okay. We can't, a parade through town involves 500 cars. That's difficult to do. And I don't say this negatively. We're not a small school. When we do it big, and we always have, and we will always continue to do it big. So, the prom is a difficult thing. That's a great night for everybody. And, we kind of, from an administrative point, lucked out because the venue called us and said, we can't. And I said, okay, we would like to do something in the future. What that looks like, I don't know. Maybe it's next fall to bring them back, to have a night. Graduation.
The mayor has offered to close the streets. I did see
that
in a post.
Yes.
The mayor offered to close down the center of town.
Yes, he's also chaperoning, I hope. So graduation has been a joy to deal with, to be honest with you, because Superintendent Deacon called me and said, what are we doing? And I said, well, we work hand in hand with Jostens, and a guy by the name of Ryan Ford, who has been with Leominster High School for years, called me and said, listen, we have a virtual platform. It's easy and it's free, and you send it out to families. They cut, they drag and drop their picture. They type in what they want. You can still have speeches. You can still run it live. It can be Zoomed. It can be Google Classroom, LATV, the internet, anywhere you want. We can just do it. We can do it that day, which was great. And then the superintendent called and said, let's do this live. And I said, okay. I said, what are we thinking? So we sat down, and she really has led this. It has been wonderful. And the mayor has been fantastic about supporting it, and the city has been great. So we decided, as you probably know, on August 1st at 9 a.m., we are having graduation. I just spoke with her and I said, listen, I want to go rain or shine. Bring your umbrella and let's go. It's a one-shot deal. We can't cancel. And so we're going to make it look a little different. I think we're going to go the long way of Doyle and seat kids 6 feet apart and seat parents and families. Tickets are going to be limited, unfortunately, but we're going to seat them the long way as well. But we're going to have that day. I think for us, the biggest piece that I heard from the kids, and that's really right what this is all about. It's their day, that they want to walk across the stage, get their diploma, have the picture, take the picture with the family, have it within, and that it's their day to celebrate. So it's been a process to try to make that happen and decide, but we're going with it. And so I know that there are some schools in the area that have opted not to and are going to go virtual, and it's a no-win situation. Okay, I'm convinced that August 1st, get ready, because there's going to be the earliest hurricane we've probably ever had in central Massachusetts. Because that's just the luck of this group. But no, I'm kidding. It's going to be beautiful, about 80, and a slight breeze goes right through Doyle. Listen, every school's different. Wachusett's got 620 kids graduating. I don't know. They always have it at the DCU Center. They can't right now. He said to me the other day on the phone, I'd love to have it there. Right now, that's a hospital. So I don't know. We're blessed too. Okay. The Doyle family has blessed this city with that, and that Doyle Field Commission taking care of it to keep that facility open, because it is big enough to have events like this, and we can do that. So it's what they deserve. It's what the class of 2020 deserves.
Graduation in the rain has been done before. 2003, you lined us all up. The music started. It was a beautiful sunny day. We entered Doyle Field. It rained buckets for the entire graduation, and we plowed right through. I'm with you. I think rain or shine is a great idea. Like you said, it's a great memory and a great celebration, even if the mortarboard is permanently curved.
That's okay, baby. That's okay.
There's nothing wrong with that. You soldier on.
They don't go quite as high when you throw them when they're little waterlogged. So start lifting, everybody.
You also have a graduation related event. Awards night is something that you are going to go forward with. Before that, you're going to do that virtually on June 4th. And that event, usually held in the auditorium, does kind of lend itself to something you could do virtually and still have it have the same meaning. Yeah,
we've, the commissioner kind of came out yesterday and said anything in the month of June, you got to back off them right now. I just can't see it happening. But we wanted to keep that night the exact same night it is. We will tape that ahead of time, and it will air at 7 o'clock like it would normally be a live situation. We're going to give our scholarship awards out that night. The mayor's going to give his award out. The Leominster Education Foundation will give all their awards. All of our families that give scholarships, many in memoriams of lost relatives, and they're very meaningful. It's a very, very meaningful night. That's what I'm missing about that night. There are families that come back and donate, and the amount of money isn't even the issue. It's the connection that family still has with Leominster High School, and they come back to see the award given in honor of their son or their brother or their father to a senior in the class of 2020, and that picture that's taken. And they always say, I want to meet so-and-so. I want to thank so-and-so. So that's the only piece for me that is going to be missing, because it's a special night for us. We kind of, meander into the cafeteria for the same thing, Becky Stillman's food that she makes for us. And that night doesn't seem to end, right? Kids don't want to go home. Families don't want to go home because it's one of the last nights before graduation that we're together. It's that Thursday night. So it will, but we'll have it. And you know what? People have been very, very accommodating for us.
No question about that. Nothing is going to get done at this point, as it never does, without a large form of community support. along the way? Well, we're talking about the class of 2020 with Principal Dr. Steve Dubzinski from Leominster High School. Many people don't know, or maybe they do if they were involved in education. You were in the guidance department before, rising to the level of administration. So I got to have you dust off the guidance counselor / college prep advisor hat for a little bit while we're talking about the class of 2020, because their decisions certainly just got a lot more difficult. And I've appreciated that more and more as I've talked to my own seniors in class. And the combination of things and factors that play into this. One, a lot of them are saying they don't want to pay for higher education while they're sitting at home. That's a really difficult piece. I'm going to pay full ticket to go to X school, and we all know that X school is very expensive, but I'm going to be sitting in my house while I do it. That's awfully difficult when you see it. So I keep hearing a lot of things about gap year, and I know that's a difficult choice for a lot of people, and the statistics are go depending a number of different ways. And then there's institutions of higher learning that aren't sure they're going to accept a freshman class. So if I've decided to go to institution X, and that's the decision I've made, rejecting all of my other options, I may not have any place to go come this fall. This decision, which is always complicated by financials and a million other factors, just got more difficult.
Yeah, it's an awful time right now, right, to make these decisions because the unknown, right? You're right. What you just described, it's a tough enough decision to make a year ago, never mind now. And a lot of schools, May 1st has always been that we call decision day. We usually have kids wear their sweatshirt or hat, or if it's the military they're going to, or they're going into a trade or a job, to celebrate what they're doing. And we had planned on doing that even virtually and asking them to send a picture in. And then many colleges moved their deadline to June 1st. And, but the other piece of that is that this country has now taken an economic hit financially, and there are parents out of work. And so that in financial aid, I don't necessarily see that increasing because colleges are under the gun as well. So you're right. There are a lot of factors. I do think, I have 2 nephews and a niece in college right now. They were all sent home. And I am a little bit partial because I think the spring is probably the best time to be a college student. You've been cooped up in New England with that tough weather, and then all of a sudden the weather gets warm and everyone's out of their dorms, and there's activities going on, usually good fun activities, and you celebrate and you have a good time. So I think that's a whole piece that people are missing right now. But the choices, they're hard. And I think many of our kids had already kind of chosen and now may have to take a step back. You're absolutely right. I was speaking to a couple of our students that they're not sure that they're going to open in the fall. They may be remote. And they were going to have, an apartment in Boston or apartment off campus. And I said to them, you're not going to like what I'm going to tell you, but live at home. If you're going to go remote, save your money, live at home, and you're going to be glad you did down the stretch. But it's a hard decision to make, and especially for this year's class. I think the current freshmen. You look at what you just lost as an athlete. If you're a baseball player, I think of Pat Gallagher, right? He was down at UConn throwing the baseball, and here we go. It's his season, and it's his time to shine, and it's been cut short. So it's hard. It's hard for everybody.
It's a tough period of time, to say the least. And of course, you were mentioning some of the financial pieces, because you may have already made a decision, and then with an unemployment rate nationally that's rising to 30% or better as the weeks seem to go by, all of a sudden money you thought was going to be there is not there anymore. So it creates this question of, our college, 2-year college is going to become, a better place. Are more online options going to be better from, the traditional school model? How much is higher education going to change for this class and maybe the ones that follow them in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a huge financial burden. And of course you have, some institutions that are solvent and they're going to be fine and they can weather the storm. But I think we started to see some of the smaller private schools either combine or close down before this hit. And I just, I see, I'm not quite sure I know Harvard was one of them. There was another institution that got a small business loan that they've now decided to pay back, which I think is
can't imagine why.
Yeah, good PR. So yeah, I think it's a hard thing. I'm looking at you. Is that a Syracuse shirt you have on?
It is indeed.
It is, and I just think back. For you, it may have not been a tough decision, to be honest with you, because and many people of your viewers don't know this, but I'm going to just open it up, into the Newhouse School of Communications, arguably the hardest communication school in the country to get into. As your good friend Sean McDonough often says, the Harvard of Northern New York. He says it on every broadcast. So, think back to your own decision financially and everything else, and chasing the dreams of what you wanted to do and where you wanted to go. And you get in, and now what? And now the rug is somewhat pulled out from underneath you. It's, you're going away for the first time, you're living in a dorm, you're away from your, there's so many factors. And now and I think you said it best. It's the unknown, right? It's what we don't know what the fall is going to look like. I think a lot of schools are trying to make that decision by July 1st of what the fall is going to look like. Athletically, what's it going to look like? I'm going to coin this. I coached football with my dad for a long time, and I think a couple of those nights we were well ahead of the game and practiced social distancing because we didn't come within 6 feet of the ball carrier on several occasions. So, we were well ahead of our time.
We will get to that in a bit, and we'll peel that apart a little bit more. It's funny you make that point about Syracuse, because I've said this, just with the COVID aside, if today I had to face that decision, and I think about students that are facing that decision, and there are, many of my students that have inquired about Syracuse, and I'm a big supporter of, if you can do it, that's great. But if the $70,000 price tag that comes with it was on it, 10 or 15 years ago, it wasn't in the cards, before any of this, so the cost of college was impacted just in, the sheer growth, the 6.5% cost increase over time. Now with the financial hits they're all taking, if that cost is going to rise much more, you are going to price kids out of the market. And that's a really difficult problem.
Yeah. And I think the elite schools per se have had that pocket of financial aid that they've been able to give out. So to get that, the middle class student to go to a very expensive school and not let it be such a huge burden on their family, well, I think that pot of gold is now going to be drying up. And so the separation between the haves and the have-nots educationally is going to be even further apart than it is right now.
As you look beyond, obviously, this class of 2020, and you think about, you're going to have a whole incoming class of freshmen that are going to obviously make some decisions coming to Leominster High School very early on. They're going to decide, do they go to the traditional Leominster High School, or do they go to Leominster CTEI? And I think that's a huge decision that I think maybe is changing more and more. First of all, one big building, something that not everybody is fortunate enough to have. In my opinion, the true definition of comprehensive, right? It's you have traditional education on one half of the building, and you have technical education on the other half of the building. Technical education, more and more now, I think we're seeing, especially because of the cost of college and people realizing that maybe pushing everybody for a 4-year degree might not be the right thing, because we do need plumbers and chefs and electricians and machine operators. Those jobs aren't going away just because things are changing in the future. And there's a lot of other jobs that obviously are going to continue to exist on the technical side as well. Do you think that decision gets a little bit more tougher, where maybe technical education becomes more emphasized?
Yeah, I think we saw that even before this. My dad has always said that the city of Leominster, whoever made the decision 50, 60 years ago to go comprehensive, was a genius, because every kid stays in Leominster. Every kid has that opportunity. There's not an application process. You just go. And I just looked at our numbers. We're starting to run our schedule for next year, as difficult as it is right now to do that. I think we have 250 kids, freshmen, have signed up for our vocational school as freshmen to just kind of explore it. Excuse me. It doesn't mean they're going to stay there. It doesn't mean that's for them. But that's an increase over this year, of about 20 to 30 students. So I do think, learning that skill that you can leave Leominster High School and then go get a very well-paying job out of high school. Danny Bayshant does a great job running it, and before him, David Fiandaca, who is as salt of the earth. But those guys really have set up a program where the internships and the availability to go outside of the classroom and really do hands-on learning every day has been great. So I see an increase of that. I see our vocational schools across the state attracting more and more kids. You know, I always say this, it's not your grandmother's Voc school. All right. It's really not. It's a high end learning environment, skill based, very, you know, I joke all the time. There are three people that I would always trust with my life. One was Dr. Faust, who was my family doctor. Dr. Harrisamowitz was my dentist, and Louis Miller used to fix the car. Okay. Because without those three people, I wasn't going anywhere. After that, you'd see the Boucher family or the Mack family, because they were funeral directors. But let's hope it never got to that point.
No, no question about that. And, you know, you make reference, of course, to the stigma. Again, we go back 20 years or more ago, there was this huge stigma to the existence of technical education. And maybe it's just because I see it in my own world, or because in the district I work in, I'm considered a technical teacher of all things. That stigma doesn't exist anymore. And I think more and more and more, you are absolutely right. Technical education is just another word for hands-on engagement in real world activities.
Yeah, you know, I think last year there was a stigma, and it doesn't happen like that anymore. Last year at graduation, our valedictorian and our salutatorian were both CTI students out of our electronics program, Smit Patel and Eric Jenny, you know, and as bright as they come, you know. And so it was a tribute to their work ethic, and also the evolution of vocational education, especially in the state of Massachusetts, because I think Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito have really made this a priority.
I remember watching that graduation and thinking to myself, because there's always been the valedictorian, the salutatorian, and then the highest ranking member of CTEI, then CTE when I was coming through, but that was the same person. That doesn't ever happen that I know of.
No. And it was also, the crowd liked it also because it cut down on one speech too. So that was also, we shortened the ceremony.
Anything we can do to shorten the 3 hours baking on Doyle Field. Well, a little rain can help all of that as you go through the process. You were mentioning you're already starting to think about and run your schedule, for better for worse, under these circumstances. So reintegration is obviously the next thing on the agenda. You know, we'll finish this year somewhere around that June 16 to 19 for everybody, you know, this school year. And then we'll move on to 2020, 2021 in the fall, hopefully under quote unquote normal circumstances. But we've talked about normal circumstances may be different. Things like that are being discussed: masks, one-way hallways, socially distant classrooms. I've tried to imagine a socially distant classroom in a floor plan that already exists. You can't change the walls, and you can't hold every class in the cafeteria. So how do you set up these circumstances and reintegrate under socially distant policies?
Yeah, those are, you know, and again, I want to tip my hat to the superintendent. We met this week. What's today? Tuesday? That's another thing, Todd. I have no idea what day it is.
No, me neither.
We met last week and kind of just brainstormed about the ideas that you just brought up, because I think the CDC had come out with some preliminary guidelines about, you know, we can't, you know, if I have 25 kids in a classroom and the walls are where they are, they can't fit 6 feet apart. Okay, so what would that look like? What would a schedule look like? What would, you know, the hallways? What would, you know, we talked last week busing. All right, some of our buses are at capacity. Lunchroom, okay, athletics, theater, the band, gym class. There were certain things that had to be discussed, and so I think we're getting ahead of that. You know, we're starting to plan. If A happens, this is what it's going to look like. If B happens, this is what it's going to look like. So I think that what's discussed sometimes over coffee at the breakfast table among families is reality for us. And we've got a plan. We've got a plan about what that's going to look like. And, you know, I'm in Market Basket and scolded the other day because apparently I was traveling the wrong way down an aisle. And
in that world, I can see.
I won't be doing that anymore. For
be more conscious of where the arrows are. It's much more difficult.
Should just make my own pasta sauce like a good boy from Leominster and not buy the canned version. Okay.
I have a coworker that is our consumer and family sciences teacher, and you know we've talked to her, you know, as we've been going through this process and having department meetings, and she's always talking about how she yells at, you know, people in the grocery stores who go up and down the aisles, in the wrong direction. And I thought to myself, heaven help the person that goes down the one-way hallway by her classroom the wrong way
Right.
when we
Right.
return.
Right. You know, Gardner High School, I think Gardner High School was, and my alma mater was way ahead of its time because it's round. So, okay. So you can just
keep right on going.
You can't get cornered. You can't get cornered at Gardner High School. That was always blind.
You pointed to a couple of those items, and busing is certainly one of them. I had seen a conversation talking about running buses at half capacity. And in my mind, I immediately went, time out. Half capacity means running double runs on every run. And busing is already, in a city like Leominster, a cost prohibitive measure. It's a measure that's already killing a budget because of the amount of money that has to go into transportation and the costs that you can't recoup under state law. That in and of itself, I'm thinking, you're going to double that cost? If we had 20 buses, we need 40 buses now. Where's that money coming from?
Yeah. And, you know, so take that money piece out of it. And when do you do it? What time are you picking up the first kid? All right. We ran at the end of last year some double routes in the afternoon to drop kids off. Some of our places where kids would go to drop off to get to work, or the buses were too full. It's not fun for that extra kid to wait the extra half an hour, 40 minutes while that bus does its route and come back. You know, it's even more fun supervising them. So, you know, there's a lot of
them in between.
Right.
Right.
You know, and you know what, Todd, I also, you know, our building is, you know, we had a renovation. It's a clean building. It's fairly new. And, but I have faculty members that, you know, I have a faculty member that teaches. She's 70 years old. I have a secretary who's 70 years old. We have people who are pregnant. We have people who have either battled cancer or are somewhat compromised. And so you kind of take all those factors into play here. And even if it's not you, that student is going to be in that atmosphere and then going home. And they might live with their grandparents who are, you know, X age or Y age. And so there's a lot. It's not just as simple as open the doors and let them come back. There's a lot of factors. There's a lot of factors here.
No, you're pointing to something that I certainly have thought of, because we all have, of course, coworkers that have circumstances, like you said, whether it's their own personal circumstances and complicating conditions, or whether they, you know, support the lone caretaker for their parents. And you know, so they are nervous about returning to a public facility. And then, of course, you have students who are certainly going to be nervous to return to a public facility. So how important is mitigating that anxiety and helping people and being supportive of people going to be in trying to return to what we know to be normal operations?
Yeah, and that's one of the things we've discussed as, you know, not even the return yet, but like what's going on now. Kids are in their homes. Kids are not getting out. Parents are being laid off. There's a lot of, you know, the curriculum is well beyond English, math, social studies, science, world language, and arts and phys ed right now. It is lifetime. You know, they are living at home with families under tense situations. And I don't know if no one was more welcome to see a happy sunny weekend than the state of Massachusetts 2 days ago, because people were able to finally get outside and obviously get masked up and head out and do what you got to do and stay distance from each other. But that sunshine certainly made things a little bit easier for everybody. So it's that anxiety piece. And there's some stress. There's some stress now, and there'll be stress when we return.
And every school district, of course, is trying to, you know, prepare for reintegration into normal, you know, world with, you know, socially distant modifications. And some districts are also going as far as to say, what if 2020, 2021 doesn't resume in person and continues online? Worcester Public Schools, we're told, has notified their employees to be prepared to deliver a curriculum online for the entirety of next year. There are other school districts in Eastern Mass that are talking about being prepared for that. So in your mind, what if there is another half a year to January, or another full year of this, that we have become this virtual schooling that we're all having to do?
Yeah, I'm hoping, you know, I get the what if, or, you know, whatever the case is. That actually came up in our meeting the other day when talking about the return with the superintendent. My hope is that there's enough leadway that say August 1st is the deadline, and they say, we're not opening on time. We're going through at least Thanksgiving, and then we're going to try it for whatever it looks like. And I'm going to tell you, I have no inside information on anything. but I just hope there is some lead time. I think we'll be better prepared because of what we just went through. I think there'll be stricter guidelines in terms of attendance and expectations of students and, grading, if you want to call it that. So I just hope that there's some lead time. You got to remember, as we talked earlier, for those of you who are tuning in late, you missed it.
Where have you been?
Beginning. Right. Thanks. Okay. Take Jeopardy off the TV. What time does this air, by the way?
7:30 on Wednesday.
Oh, it is Jeopardy.
It is.
So it is. You're conflicting my schedule, brother. This is what it's come to. Okay, Wheel of Fortune at 7, Jeopardy at
7:30. I understand. I do.
Okay. Yeah, what if, but I think we'll be prepared because of what we've just been through, that kids know how to access it. But your expectation is, we were thrown at this March 12th. This is what you're doing. See ya. And again, I can't say enough about the Leominster Public Schools for the preparation. We didn't have any preparation, and all of a sudden, this is the product we're producing. I think we've done a great job.
I can't let you go without talking a little bit about athletics along the way and getting that hat out to discuss some of the things that are going on there. And of course, the first piece is, and you mentioned it, athletics, extracurriculars, they are a natural extension of what we do every single day in the classrooms. Can things like, is there anything less socially distant than the sport of football, which you alluded to earlier?
No.
So football with masks beyond the helmet really that's not going to matter. Right. So if they're going to resume, can they resume under these circumstances, or do we have to wait even longer?
I don't know. You want to talk about an economic hit? They were throwing money. The NCAA was throwing money out, how much money they lost from the March Madness tournament. And it's craziness. It's the athletic piece. My heart breaks for our theater kids who were just about ready to head to the state festival for Lord of the Flies. And, and they were ready to go. In our band, we have a new band director, Barry Hudson, who's, as you know, phenomenal. Handed it off to Bobby Bergeron, and Arthur Pierce, who does our music, was ready to go for our spring concerts and our spring art shows. And now athletics, right, taken away. So, no, I don't know how you can not open the school, but still have athletics. I think that sends a crazy message, right? Someone kind of said to me about, well, we should have just a summer tournament of lacrosse or a summer tournament of baseball in the league. And I said, listen, they've just canceled the Olympics and Wimbledon. All right. Now, no offense to the JV baseball team from wherever, because I think it's important, as you know.
Yes,
right? You
very much
know
so.
my background. But let's keep this whole thing in perspective here about what's best for people to be safe. And I know there's an undercurrent here of things to get back to normal. And there's a whole group of people that just say, let's go and let it run its course. And let the chips fall where they may. So, the athletics are a big piece. I did hear that some states are talking about basketball is going to be January, February. Football is going to be March, April. Baseball is going to be May, June of next year, and they're going to waive the fall. I don't know if that has any traction. There is a big meeting, I believe, this week, and you'll have to forgive me, on
whatever day that is.
Yeah, with DESE and the MIAA. So to try because it's a huge piece. It's a huge piece of schools. It's, that a Friday night at Doyle Field with a big game and a huge crowd and the band playing and the cheerleaders going and everybody, and Tracy Hartman with her championship group out there again. And it's terrific, and it's what it should be. And that's what we all long for, to get back there.
And I think it would be a true sign, of course, of a return to normal would be to get back to those things as well that are naturally extend right beyond the classroom. Hopefully we can return to public education, under normal circumstances come this fall or soon thereafter. And then obviously these things follow their course right behind them as well.
I do long for the day that you announce the visiting soccer team first or second, whatever it was, at Doyle Field. And when you have to make the announcements for introducing you and Dick Tucker to do the soccer finals.
No question about that. There are so many things out there that we can think of and cover. Hey, I'm having to consider esports somewhere along the way.
Right.
As we go through this process, there are people that are putting esports forward at the high school level. That's amazing to imagine. I've said I can't see myself doing esports anytime soon, but we'll do this interview 20 years from now, and we'll see where we're all at.
Axe throwing and cornhole championships. That's where this is headed.
No question about that. Two things on the athletic agenda, maybe on a lighter note, we'll say. Classic replay this week, of course, features 2001 boys basketball versus Marlborough. This was your very first season as Leominster head coach. What do you remember of that very first season?
I don't. How's that? No.
It all became a blur somewhere along the way.
It does. They start to blend. I never understood my dad, and then I start to, I had the very good fortune of seeing Mark Daignault this past, it was right before this happened. Oklahoma City, ironically enough, played the Celts on a Sunday night. It was right before the closure. I brought my parents to the Garden. I saw Mark on Saturday night. They don't stay in little hotels anymore. When you travel with the NBA, you stay in very nice establishments. Ironically, is it Utah Jazz that had
yes.
Whoever was in? Okay, they had been following the same path. Like the Oklahoma City was 2 days behind, so they were following the same path as the Utah Jazz. So Mark was at the game when it got shut down. The NBA got shut down that night because of Rudy Gobert. But that was Hashig. I've stayed very close with the Hashigs, and it was a great group. It was a very welcoming group. Ron Maz had a great run the year before, had knocked off when you said to me that they're going to play the Marlborough game. I thought it was the year before when Marlborough was the 1 seed, I believe, and Leominster went down and knocked them off. I think Marlborough was either 19-1 or undefeated, and Maz took Stan Miller and the crew and went down there and beat them down at Marlborough, which was a great win. Well, my first year, what I get from that is Eric Kissler, and Scotty Burke, and Hash and the crew, and Erdman, who I still stay in touch with. And you talk about relationships with teachers, and it's the same goes for kids. You want the truth? I don't remember the game very well, but I remember the relationships with those kids who are now young men. And you talk about the scholarship night. That's what came to mind. I didn't say it, but the Hashigs give a scholarship in honor of Jeff. And so to see those, that's what this whole thing is about, right? The relationships with people, and you've touched upon it several times. So yeah, I don't know. That Marlborough guy, I don't even know. I texted you the other day, did we win? You better show one that we win, for God's sake.
I hear that from everybody. Why did you pick that one? We didn't win. Well, if you're going to ruin other communities, you're going to lose every now and again.
No, God's sakes. There's only like 3 you can pick from. I get that. But pick a one we won, for God's sakes. Will you please?
One last point before we go on athletics. I can't help but get the opportunity to ask you about this statewide tournament. Obviously, you've been there, you've gone through it, you grew up with the district, and now called sectional tournaments, and then obviously the crossover between Central and West, and then into the North-South versus Central-West state championship model that has been around for so long at this point in time. And 2 years from now, it's gone. That's a thing of the past. And here we go to this statewide tournament. I know Leominster voted in the affirmative. We've had A.D. Palazzi on to talk about it, but I have to imagine you certainly had your own thoughts about this and got a chance to express those as well.
What did Palazzi tell you? He said he voted for it?
He voted in the affirmative.
It was the Australian ballot, so no one knows how he voted. Listen, I understand what the state's trying to do, and I agree with it. I miss the local game. I'm not necessarily a big fan of a state championship in football. Okay. So for 6 teams or 8 teams, it's a wonderful occasion, and I get that. But I still think a Leominster St. John's, a Leominster Shrewsbury, a Leominster Wachusett Shrewsbury game at Fitton Field on the Saturday after Thanksgiving, 10 days after Thanksgiving for a Central Mass title, you'd pack the place and it would be more meaningful than, and my dad won the Super Bowl in '97 and beat Wacona. It was an unbelievable game. The Wacona-Gardner rivalry is not really what it is all cracked up to be. The Pittsfield-Barnstable route is going to be a fun ride on a Tuesday night to play a game. I don't know. I'm not sold on Franklin playing Natick in the Central Mass Championship in boys basketball. It's the days are gone of, and we're very lucky in Central Mass to have the venues that we have at WPI. So I'm a regional guy, and I would prefer to stay that way, but it has been, as we voted apparently in the affirmative, um, it's gone the way of that way. The other piece is that there's going to be 32 teams in Division One. You know, you hope to be 33. All right, you long to be 33 and be the biggest school in Division Two. And just so that you know, we are hovering right around 31, 32, 33. So it's going to be about whatever the enrollment numbers are in terms of football to look at those. But, you know, it's going to be some excitement. But we're talking about budget cuts right now across the state. And you're adding about a bus ride from here to, you know, Barnstable. And so to play that game on a Wednesday night and get that kid back for 7:30 English class the next day, too. I don't know. I get it. I've talked to a lot of people about it, and I know that's where we're headed. So we'll make the best we can do.
Fitchburg director Craig Antossi said this. He goes, "How many buses do I have to send to move a football team anywhere at this point in time?" I mean, that alone, you know, one bus, two buses. There was time it was two buses and a cheerleader bus. Now is it six? I mean, I can't even imagine. Can't even imagine.
Well, Todd, you were with us when we went out to Holyoke, and we got sent to out west and Longmeadow and Springfield, and you know, no, take the basketball. I don't. As a parent, you want your son driving out on the Mass Pike on a Tuesday night to Chicopee? No, I don't know. I think you're asking for problems when you're driving by 31 other high schools that you could compete against for a game. But
and I think that's the only reason I supported this concept of the statewide tournament. At least everybody has to share the burden, because the alternative was, you know, Leominster going to be, you know, is slotted with Holyoke. And then, you know, I joked on this broadcast a number of times, Lee was slotted in the Albany division in order to make sure that we could just keep moving people up. I mean, that was much worse to me. So, you know,
we're playing Springfield. They said Central, no, Illinois. So,
and, you know, I didn't even have to play the game with you. You covered this for me. I've been doing this with everybody. I said, okay, Leominster versus this team, Leominster versus this team, Leominster versus this team, or Leominster versus Wachusett, Leominster versus Shrewsbury, Leominster versus whatever. Most people just go, no. And then we just
right.
Along the way. So. Leominster High School Principal Dr. Steve Dubzinski, thank you so much for joining us here on.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, my friend.
We will we'll have you back again soon, hopefully under more positive and normal circumstances. Live and in person would be a real big win as well. We thank all of you so very much for joining us here on Rivalry Family Media's Press Row. For all of us at Rivalry Family Media, I am Todd Robbins saying thank you so very much for joining us, and until next time, so long, everybody.